Yeah, so I've presented on OS before, but it's usually to an audience which is, very invested in the game. Players that have played for years and come to an event specifically for OS. So I kind of tried my best to get a lot of the history and the nuances in the last 10, 12 years. But yeah, I've probably missed some stuff, so just putting that out there. And the other thing is, I'm not really here to give necessarily good advice. I'm more here to tell a story and share my experience and take from it what you will. But yeah, I'm not willing to say what I'm telling you here is good or not. So yeah, I'm Peppy. My real name's Dean Herbert. And I'll just go through a bit of history. So this is me when I was 3. My favorite toy was a calculator. I've always been into gadgets when I was younger. Had a Commodore 64, got a hold of paddles, which are like remote control input devices for playing Pong, with no better explanation. And that's my Commodore 64. So that's when I first got into programming. I was into BASIC. I did have a look, like I had a disk with an assembly program on it, but I could never figure out how to use that. Didn't really have the instruction manual or any kind of guidance back then. No internet, no way of looking this stuff up. So yeah, I wrote a lot of programs in BASIC. Yeah, that's me at the arcades. Yeah, Nintendo 64. So I was always into gaming when I was younger. I went through the consoles. I never really owned consoles myself. I used to just rent them out. I was more into the PC side of things, so I did have a 486, and I kept upgrading that basically every time it got to a power of 2, or double CPU speed. So went to the Pentium 2, then Pentium 3, then Pentium 4. Doubling the megahertz back then, it actually mattered. That's one of my PC setups. Dual display, actually dual PCs running in the background, not single PC. My dad built me this basement lair, which is like a landing area. We had desks going around the whole way, like got 15 people down there, had some pretty big parties. And that's one of my PCs, full tower case, had like 15 hard drives or something inside of it. Yeah, so that's just my dev history. As I said, I started with BASIC on Commodore 64. I did write a few games back then. It was just like ASCII kind of platformers. You're very limited when. How many of you have ever tried BASIC programming? Yeah, a few of that. It's quite limiting in what you can do. So, I never made anything great. It was always using ASCII characters to move around the screen and updating at a very low refresh rate. But it was nice to get something on the screen. I moved on to Click and Play at the Games Factory. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of those. Very early game engines, yeah. And that was basically you're dragging things into the game field, and then you have a grid where you can give individual sprites or objects in the game actions or conditionals, basically a programming language in an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, so I made 10 or 20 very weird games on the Games Factory and Click and Play, and one of them actually got featured on a French shareware CD, back when they had the CDs clipped onto the magazines, the PC magazines. So that was a pretty big milestone for me. They actually sent me a copy of it. I've got it laying around somewhere. It wasn't the best game, but back then the standards were low. And yeah, that's about all the game coding I did in primary school. I went into high school and didn't really do much on the side of games. I went into more, I got really interested in when Microsoft released the C#, the .NET standard. We printed out on the school printers like a 300-page wad of text with the whole C# standard, and I read through it with one of my good friends. And yeah, I got really, because it was a nice programming language, and I didn't use that many different languages before then, but C# was really, inspiring for us. Yeah, and I also ran a lot of websites back during high school. One of the bigger ones was a Windows XP beta fan site. So I was not only distributing Windows XP betas, not so legally, but also giving people the resources to bypass certain protection methods and, weird stuff. I did get a DMCA. Well, DMCA wasn't around back then, but I got a takedown request from Microsoft, and that was the end of that. But I had a forum with thousands of users registered, and that was really fun. I guess that was my first big web community project. And yeah, I played more games in high school than actually making them. I did make some tools for games. These are some of the games which really inspired me going forward. Games which have a lot of the multiplayer online aspects in new ways which weren't really able to be experienced until the internet came around and we got decent modems and decent connection speeds. And yeah, I like the creative aspect of games as well. So when you could actually go into the game and do something, make something for yourself. Rhythm games, I started getting into them in 2001 when I found a Beatmania machine at one of the local time zone arcades. I don't think it lasted that long. They usually came in and then disappeared within a week. So it was kind of disappointing when it disappeared. But then I went online and I found out that people had actually made these simulators for the games. And they played basically the same. You could download the same content from the internet. People had made their own stuff. It's commonly known as BMS, they called it in the early days, Beatmania Simulator, or I think it's the actual format name. Yeah, so I got into that. This is one of the simulators that I played on. One of my memories of it was when I was going on exchange to Japan in our hotel room. I had my laptop there and I installed this, and we were sharing, there were three people in the room, and we just constantly were playing this game on one song and trying to get the best score, for 10 hours at a time into the hours of the night. DJ Max is also a big inspiration to me. That was a PC rhythm game release that had online multiplayer. It was, I think they had Japanese and maybe some other Southeast Asia servers, but I joined the Japanese server, and it was the first time when a company really brought out an online PC rhythm game, like an official kind of thing. They did a really good job of integrating multiplayer rooms and chat, and it had very community feeling to it. And yeah, that brings us on to Oendan, Os Tatakai Oendan, which is kind of the game which Os is based on. I first experienced that on a flash cartridge on Nintendo DS. You obviously can't get this over here because this is a Japanese only release, region locked. So yeah, one of my friends had 1,000 games loaded in, and we were just going down the list one by one. And we came across this hey, this is actually pretty cool. The original game. How many of you have played Os Tatakai Oendan or Elite Beat Agents? Yeah, so a few. They did a good job of not only the rhythm game aspects, but the story was very imaginative, and as you're playing on, the story changes. How you're doing the story changes depending on how well you're doing in the game. So you got this feedback loop. And yeah, I played that Os Tatakai Oendan while I was working at a Farmer Jack supermarket. In my lunch hours, I used to take my DS and just get it out and I was trying to beat the last level, and it had this really annoying long spinning section. And it gets to the point where you break the DS screen because you're spinning so hard on it. I finally passed that, but once I passed the game, I got to the end. It's well, this game only has 12 tracks, but I'm listening to this in the supermarket. I'm hearing this pop music, and I'm I want to make levels for this. I can see the objects on the screen. So that's kind of where this whole project started. It was just basically a prototype I made up. Microsoft just came out with the XNA framework, which is a C# game framework. It was kind of targeted at PC plus Xbox, bridging that gap to a certain extent. And this is what I made initially. So it's very raw. This is the first screenshots I have of the game. And I took this to one of the LAN parties that we organized and gave it out to my friends there, and they'd all been playing Oendan. the Nintendo one. And from day one, I had an editor in the game, so we all made levels for it, and we ended up playing it for like hours on end. Even in this state, it was, it had the ingredients to become something fun. So I kind of kept working on it, and this is after a month of tidying things up. You can see the menus evolved quite a bit, starting to look like something. And then, I started working in July, and in September of the same year, I released it as a public beta. And to do that, I made my own forum system and website and stuff. And, I was trying to put the pieces there just so if people wanted to play the game or start participating in the community, they had somewhere to do that. So this is a very early video of it. Which one am I? Look. Can I drop the volume down a bit?
Yes. All right. I don't know what you pressed.
Am I still on? Yeah. So that's like one of the earliest videos I have of the game, and as you can see, it's in a very very raw state. But I made that level. That was one of the first beat maps, as we call them. We call the game files beat maps. How many people here have actually played OS or are familiar enough? Okay, so most of you. But I'll continue explaining the basic terms because I kind of made them up as I went. There was this whole beat map thing is OS specific. So a beat map is a level format which you can create in the in-game editor. It's just the beats timed to the level. This is me on the original release. My most ambitious aim of this project is to create a thriving community around the game itself. And I think I said something about wanting to get the word around, but I never really did that because people did it for me. So it was very organic growth with the game. I was posting my dev changelogs just to the forum at that point. Later I made a proper changelog system, but yeah, every day I would just post this massive wall of what I'd changed in the game. And from the start I was kind of, I wanted to keep up the dev communication thing because I wanted people to kind of come on the journey with us. And yeah, this is the first time we got a spike in traffic. So Joystick is a site. I'm not sure if they're still around or still really doing news, but they featured us and you can see a sudden spike in traffic. I think that's hits per day or something. And yeah, this is another big spike we had. One of our community members was very good at creating content, and he was a guy that was into making Winamp skins at the time, and he was also very interested in Phoenix Wright. So he made this crossover with Elite Beat Agents and Phoenix Wright, and he did this in the game. So all this time I was implementing new features. One of the things he asked for was this storyboard idea, which is basically taking the thing that Nintendo did or NIS did with the original Owen Done, and putting a story in the background that you can actually sync up with the user's gameplay and change what happens based on how you're hitting beats on the screen. So that community member was actually responsible for the direction of the game at that point because he's like, add this, add that, I need this. So I just kept up with what he was asking for. His name's Luigi Han, in case he ever sees this. But he made this level for the game, and it was like something new because he actually made a new story for it. He did all the sprite artwork and got everything in sync, and it created quite a bit of hype because not only people interested in the game itself, but people interested in Phoenix Wright, and just the general gaming community suddenly picked up on this. So I'll play a bit of this. Oh yeah, that has a second or so before it comes in. Yeah, so all this is actually done in-game with an in-game editor where you could just place sprites on the screen, just drag the JPEG or PNG files in and then move them around, give them fade. It was like a Flash kind of editor. And it had different layers depending on if you're passing or failing or the different game states. And it was just like really well done. He took a lot of the sprites from both of the other games, so not so much on the art side of things, but just getting everything synced up and working well. And none of this is video, this is all in-game. So yeah, depending on how well you do in the actual rhythm gameplay, it changes the storyline to the point where you actually win or fail the case at the end. And he also made the skin look like Elite Beat Agents. At the time, we had our own OS skin, but this is all made to look like the original game and sound like it as well. Yeah, so it was really well done. We got featured on, what site is this? I don't know what this is. Anyway, another news site. That was another huge spike. Yeah, so that's kind of the direction things were going. I kept keeping up with what people wanted to see in the game, and also just trying to build the community. I'll talk a bit about the community growth. So as we continued growing, it was for the first 3 or 4 years, it was pretty linear, slow growth. So I could kind of keep up quite well. We started appointing community moderators, tried to get the community as involved as they could be in self-moderating. Had regular meetings, so every weekend I would organize a meeting on IRC. We had in-game chat, which was integrated with an IRC server, so we just jumped on there and we discussed all the things going on and how we should be changing things, how we should be changing the rules of how beatmaps were approved. We had this process where only beatmaps of a certain quality could be uploaded or put into a ranked state, and when they get in a ranked state, it means you can actually compete online. So a lot of the other games at the time didn't have that kind of quality check measure, which brought a lot of rhythm game fans towards us more than things like Stepmania, I think. It's just that we had a very high level of quality in the beatmaps available from the start. And yeah, it was a very a lot of the stuff going on. I basically had a hand in everything. I was working a full-time job at the time. I started doing some what do you call it? At the end of my uni degree, I went and did work experience. So I was working full-time, and then I would get home and spend like 12 hours working on OS and sleep like an hour or two. I did that for a good few years, but then it just got too much, as you can imagine. Oh yeah, and talking about the ranking criteria for beatmaps, this is, what am I saying? Yeah. So I'll just show you what we have right now. This is current day ranking criteria. This is all the things you have to watch out for when actually uploading a beatmap. So it's quite extensive, and this has been a working document over the last 12 years. All the different things which go into making a beatmap. So yeah, approaching it as a new user these days can be quite daunting, but we still have teams that help people through the process. So when you upload a map, there's teams which will step in, and we have our own interface on the website which lets you put feedback in against game objects, so it gets correlated, easy for the user to figure out. So yeah, I'm just going to take a moment away from things and mention that I did make an arcade unit just as a prototype, and that I put that down at YCon one year. You guys been to YCon? I don't think it exists anymore.
I told you to put it in that word.
I know you. Yeah. So that was kind of the first time OS got out in the public in a physical way. I made that arcade with my dad. It was just kind of seeing if I could do it. I got a touchscreen ordered over from the US, it's actually a infrared touchscreen, so it has a layer on top for infrared detection. Made it quite low latency and means you don't have to drag your finger on the screen too much. Brock's going to say that's incorrect, aren't you?
Yeah,
This-
latency was pretty poor.
This one is before the second model had the infrared.
Yes, yeah, that one was acoustic touch by yellow.
That's right. Brock currently has this arcade. He's done some epic mods on it. Yeah, so I like to keep the touch inputs back then because that's how the original game was played and it just felt right to be touching these things on the screen. We also ended up adding more game modes. So it wasn't just the OS game style, but there's also the OS Mania, which is like Beat Mania, falling from the top, Taiko mode, and catch the beat, which is fruit dropping from the top. That's just something I encountered as a mini game in one of the simulators I was playing back in the day. And at the start, they were considered mini games inside of OS. They just sat on the side and you could play them if you wanted, but eventually we expanded these out into their own game modes and modularized all the systems, all the backends to allow score uploads for each of these. And we also created the ability to automatically convert beat maps across from OS mode to the other modes, since with OS you have not only time data, but positional as well. You have XY positional. So it's quite easy to take XY positional and map it to the other modes. I mean, Taiko, you only need time. Mania, you only need one axis, and same with catch. So we were able to do a pretty good job at making all the modes playable from a single beat map. And one of the other things I also did along the way was make a mobile game called OS Stream. Yeah, I was just interested in mobile development back then, and at the time, OS was, it was going quite well, but I wasn't sure if it was going to, take off. I never expected OS to become as big as it has these days. So OS Stream was kind of one of the other things I was looking at doing, potentially as an alternative or potentially as something which I took forward instead. And yeah, because with the PC OS, anyone was allowed to upload content, right? And a lot of that wasn't licensed correctly. So OS Stream, I kind of took a step back and approached artists and got correct licensing for it, and also got aside a team of the OS community beatmap creators, which really knew what they were doing. Like, I just chose the best of the best and got them involved in this project. I made sure to do everything. Like, I paid all the people that were mapping and paid the artists and did it all in the correct way, just to see how that would work and if it was profitable and if it's something I wanted to do. And yeah, that is, while playing with touch is what OS was to me from the start, because that's how it was on the DS. And with OS Stream, I kind of, I added multi-touch to it. I added hold notes. I did a bit of new stuff, which still isn't present in the PC version. We're looking at adding it in the future, but it was kind of, because we had these multi-touch devices, it just made sense to do. So this is just a quick video of OS Stream. And yeah, I was really proud to get this running on iPhone 3G at 60 FPS. That took a lot of optimization. The actual code, I was sharing a lot of with the PC version. I used Xamarin iOS, which is basically lets you run C# code on iOS platform. And yeah, it worked quite well, actually. It was, in my opinion, it was a really fun game. It still is. I still play it quite often. But basically, as I was developing our stream, the PC version of Us started to rapidly take off. It got a huge amount of following, and I felt that I should be focusing back on the PC version because that's where the players were, and also that's where the community was. Like, there were a lot of players playing this Us stream, like 300,000 at one time, but there was no sense of community, there was no in-game chat, there was no multiplayer. So yeah, I don't know, it didn't interest me as much as a project, so I did continue releasing new music for that for like a year or two afterwards, but eventually I think it hasn't been updated for a while. I'm working on a final update for it just to get it into a good state and, you know, make everything free. Just let it die in peace. Oh yeah, and this is the second version of the arcade that I made. I made 2 of them this time, and I hooked them up as a head-to-head multiplayer setup. These are using the newer screens. These were a lot nicer, and I had them running off-stream as well. I found it a lot easier to make that into a real-time multiplayer thing because the PC version was, you know, made to be played over the internet, so it had accounting for latency and, you know, all these hacks in place to make sure that was a thing which could happen. Well, in head-to-head, you kind of want to see what the other player's doing immediately. So they were just hooked up with the LAN cable. One of them ran a server in the background. The server code was actually shared a lot with the PC version's server. So I borrowed a lot. And this is, yeah, it's a video. I had these set up at some pop-up events in Perth, and I shipped them across to Japan and did a few user events for the US community over there with them as well. And yeah, I used an Arduino to actually synchronize the lighting with the gameplay. And these guys are absolutely insane. These are us players playing for the first time on these arcades, and they were just, you know, double finger to get the fast nodes in. Yeah, I had a lot of fun hooking up the lighting for this. Just wrote like a small serial protocol. Serial protocol on the Arduino and sent, you know, really raw traffic across to make it light up. You helped me with that, didn't you? Yeah, back at the hackerspace. You ordered the LEDs for me. And yeah, another avenue we took is making merchandise. So this was all basically the community asked for this. It wasn't like I want to make merch for us. It was people were like switching away from using mouse and keyboard to using tablets, drawing tablets. And at the time, Wacom was the most preferred tablet, but they were also like $60, $70. And you know, the average age for this game was like 13, 14, 15-year-olds. So they couldn't afford that. So I actually got approached by a tablet company, Huion, a Hong Kong company, I think. And they offered to let us redesign, like put our design on their tablets. So we did that. And yeah, this is the OS tablet. It sold quite well. We sold like 6,000 units. And people are still asking about them. We kind of had to put them on hold because I was doing a lot of the shipping myself, and we were shipping them from Japan. And I don't know if anyone's dealt with like import freight and stuff, but it's an absolute pain in the ass. It's not something I wanted to continue doing, so I just stopped doing it. But I think we'll be able to get them back in the future. And yeah, I think I just talked about all this stuff already, but this is some of the other merch we had. It's just t-shirts and stickers and stuff that's currently available. I already said all this stuff. Yeah, we recently partnered with a merch company, which means that we can probably make this happen, make the tablets happen again in the future. But the only reason I kind of partnered with them is that they were the parents of their son actually told them about me. They were previously involved in Disney and other kind of logistics operations. And their son's like, this guy is having trouble with tablets. So they contacted me, and they've been really good. They've helped us bring the merch back online. Yeah. That's about it. And the community kept evolving. This is Comic Festa at Malaysia in 2013. It's like the first public event which I turned up at. There were community events organized by the community for the community before that. And people would just go to anime conventions and have us meetups there. But yeah, I had a presence here, and going and like meeting face to face with users was really like, I don't know, it was good to do. Having FaceTime, you really get to know what the users want, and it's, you know, with the internet, it's very not personal. You can't really make a personal connection with someone. You can't really tell if they're saying something sarcastically or not. So that kind of opened my eyes, and I thought like we should probably continue doing events going forward, whereas previously I wasn't that interested. So I went to Japan Expo in 2014, and these guys, all the guys wearing white shirts, they were already running this OS booth at Japan Expo 2 years before I actually turned up. They got permission from the organizers to have space for free, so they were just running this on their own. Pretty cool. They had like, the setup was pretty much what they had when they were doing it themselves, so I didn't help at all with this. I just made the banner. But that was awesome. Like, that was a really huge event, like hundreds of thousands of people. And they just gave us this huge space. I mean, you can see that all that space was ours. So we just had like the whole OS community there, and it was amazing. Yeah, so talking about competitive play, somewhere between like 2012, 2015, there was a shift in the community from this like creative, everyone wanting to make these like awesome beat maps to actually wanting to get the best scores. So we had to kind of change our direction to account for this. And that kind of shaped what we were focusing on from a development perspective as well. When you uploaded levels, they would just come with the star rating, which shows the difficulty, but that was a very rudimentary calculation. Like, it was just adding up what settings the user put in. So one of the community members actually made a website which figured out the difficulty of map just by analyzing the content of the map, doing heuristics on it. And that was so good that people started using that. So I reached out to him and got him to, you know, bring it into the game itself. He wrote a processor for our score system, and that became like the official thing. I did my own version of it before he attempted it, before I used his version, but it wasn't that good. I'm not hugely skilled when it comes to like statistical analysis and stuff. So it's always been a very evolving thing, the way we handle scores, and people still aren't happy with it. I don't think they'll ever be happy with it. It's also the fact that people's skill is constantly increasing, so it's very hard to keep up with that. Yeah, so the playstyle, the skinning, people have also changed the way, because the game from day one you've been able to change all the different aspects of the game to look like whatever you want them to. So people have like figured out the most pro way of configuring the game. It's like, reminds me of Quake 3 when people used to turn all the textures down to 0 and set their resolutions really low just to get the highest frame rate. It's kind of like that. I'm not sure how much I agree with that. I like the game to play like a game and be visually nice. But yeah, that's the thing. So here's some of the recent, well, this isn't a recent one. This is like 2012. This is a top play from 2012, just to give you an idea of the skill level that people have. Oh yeah, and the game had replay saving and uploading from day one, so we have a really good history going back to like the early days of these high scores. It's really handy to have.
It's the mouse, right?
This was with mouse, I think, yeah. This is one of the first like WTF moments when this guy, his name was Cookiesy. It's changed like a few times since then, but he's a beast. He's still playing. He's still a beast. Yeah. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And this is another top play. This is from 6 months ago or so, just to give you an idea of how things have changed. And you'll notice the skinning looks very different. It's a lot more simplified these days. This has all been the users which have done this. I haven't really changed the look of the game myself. Yeah, and there's a huge following on Twitch now that stream their gameplay. It's like I've never marketed this game at all. It's just been organic growth and people passing on the word. Yes, I mean this. I think this gets harder as it goes on, so it might not look as impressive at the start. But you know, there's some very precise jumps, and the hit circles are also a lot smaller. Yeah, and this is just a quick look at, this is kind of out of order, but this is the ranking system that we use these days, which is how you get your content, your beatmaps uploaded and then approved and able to be scored against. So, you know, we have a general flow where you upload your work as a work in progress and then you set it to a pending state, and then we have two different tiers of teams that go in and kind of look at the map and give feedback on it. The second one is kind of like a fail-safe if the first guys say that it's okay, but there's actually something wrong. And yeah, we also introduced like a week period during the qualified state where players can go in and play the beat maps. And if they spot an error, they can also report it. Once it goes to ranked, which is the final state, it's there for good, and scores get reset. So if you know, some people like to play in qualified just to get practice in or help out with the maps, but you really have to wait for ranked if you're interested in the actual competitive play. Yeah, okay, so just going over our 10-year anniversary event, because that was kind of a big thing. We went to Anime Expo 2017, and yeah, that was like the biggest event we've run. I did all the logistics myself, and it was a huge eye-opener to me, like how much goes into running an event and running an event space, and all the issues with like, well, the costs, first of all, it was really expensive, and just like hiring chairs, it's like $400 a chair, and you have to use, because it's all unionized and stuff, you have to use the providers they give you. So there was a lot in the logistics, but we finally got it organized, and there was a really good event. So we did like a documentary on it, and I cut it down to like 8 minutes, down from 27. So I'm just going to play the full thing because it gives you I think it will give a good insight into the community, how it's evolved.
Look at our booth space right now. So you can like stuff to all that. We around here.
Yeah, you might see a few familiar faces.
Finally got the booth running. Everyone seems to be having a good time. It's day 0, so not too many people that you have to pay extra to get in right now. Things are looking good. Today we're at day 1. It's 10 in the morning. We just opened up. Walking, so let's see how the day goes. When I looked at this game, I was like, oh, cool game to work on my reactions. And at first I was like, under the spell, like, oh, you know, help me do the legends. Oh, I'll join it. And now here I am, like years later. Still playing. Kind of intimidating. You used to be set up on the go. But it's fun experience. I like being able to bring people to land. It's something I've never actually done. Yeah.
So, the other thing I had in mind when I was organizing this is that I wanted a space for the community together. That's where the web and a lot of an area. Like, you need to plan something out a lot more PCs and, like, you know, just let people play the game. And I'm like, no, like, I'm not going to just cover this space because I knew there was going to be a lot of people who just wanted to talk, you know, share their experience, how they play
more seriously, and it feels a lot more official for everyone who's here. So not just for us, but for everyone who's coming to the booth, it's like a very, very special thing to be able to meet the creator of a game that a lot of people at least like have a very strong passion for. So thank you for all the hard work you put in, and thank you for like showing up. That's a really cool experience.
So I had a lot of people say thanks to me, and I appreciate that, but I also want to say thanks back because I think the only reason I continue to do this, like, extend 95% of my waking hours working on us is because of the community members and like the fact that people are enjoying themselves and turning out their events and just keeping going. With all that, you probably said once in a lifetime thing. I hope that we can get like a 20-year anniversary of this again. I would like to visit more countries in the future, so I do hope like I have a lot of people. We have a lot of people in Europe playing. Russia is really huge these days, and I've had several people walk up to me at this event and be like, "Please come to our event as well. We're running our own fan booths and we're up there." I understand that I can't visit all those things, but I'm also developing a team community running. So limited time, we're trying to run this to continue having events like this because, as these guys say, mad learners are waiting to meet, like meeting face to face with your opponent and seeing their emotions as meet them related to you. I think it makes all things a lot better experience.
I think what stood out most to me was I had a couple of like kind of younger kids who were just walking around the booth and they were like looking around, like they would see one person and their eyes would light up and like, oh, this like new person that they know. Or like I remember one kid like squeaked when he yelled Peppy. Like a lot of people that are here are also part of the community. Like I know that the people in this like interview are like well known within the community, but everyone here is part of it. It's really cool to see everyone interacting, and that's what I like about it.
I just like to say thanks to everyone for coming and everyone for playing us. Like, this game would be nothing without this community. I wouldn't be developing it if it wasn't for everyone playing. So, thanks for everyone here. Have a good day. Have a good rest of the
Okay, day 3. We need coffee. So, we get coffee. Coffee is very important.
Hello, we're right now at Anime Expo 2017. Today is day 3, and since things are kind of like died down a bit, so let's turn on the booth. Alright, so if you're off there, you key in your details and drop a message about what off means to you to get a free goodie. Goodie which I don't have until right now, but as you can see, this is one of the goodie. I'll just read one to you. Right inside, we have 3 awesome postcards, all illustrated by Yuta. We have a 10th anniversary sticker, we have a PP and Mocha, and we have a image. It's all free. All you need to do is just log into your Oz account, draw a message, and then you'll get one. Let's move on. Over here we have a standee artwork by Annie and here. They're pretty huge. Totally intentional. Over here is where all the players get to test out the game if they haven't, or they just simply want to like show off their skills and needs. These computers are extremely overpowered. They are i7 specs SSD with a 1.4 Hz panel. It's overkill. And also like we provide tablets, mouse, and also we have a special one with a touch screen.
want to.
Hey guys. Quick cut.
I love playing O2 and being part of the community. Awesome, the greatest game. It's been a very great experience.
With the friends I made and the people in the community, I probably couldn't be really doing anything right now.
I was burning out on O2, but coming here has given me a newfound motivation.
Happy 10th anniversary.
Thank you guys for coming and peace out. Thank you everyone, and I hope everyone's had a good time. Alright, it's the end of day 4, 6:20 afternoon. We're all pretty much dead tired, cleaning up, but all in all, good time.
Yeah, so that was our little journey to Anime Expo. And yeah, we got everyone to leave a message in the sign-in piece you had and did some cool stuff with it. And everyone on the team that you saw, they've all come from the community. So I've built a small team over the years, but everyone's been sourced from the community. So I've never been really hiring outside. This is just some of it's our booth. And since then, we've also done TwitchCon 2018. The guys I mentioned, Tangible, they kind of helped us get there. They covered some of the costs. So we did TwitchCon and ran a pretty big tournament there. We also streamed that on Twitch for like 40 hours straight. So everyone could see the whole screen setup. We had all the gameplay streamed to the central PC and then streamed that. Worked quite well. And that's more TwitchCon there. And this is another one. This is COE is the event name. It's run by this guy called Cowboy Boy, and he's basically made this huge OS-only event in the Netherlands. And 2018 they had like 200 people, and this year they had 500 and something. And this is people like coming from all of Europe and also from around the world. I made the last 2 years. I went over to visit because they're just doing such a good job that I feel like I need to be there and help out a bit. So that was 2018, yeah. You can see it just blows my mind that we have this like convention kind of thing which is just for us. This is 2019. So they had like a full stage set up. You can see all of us making the OS logo. They did like TV style, discussion shows and stuff through the whole day, and they streamed it all to Twitch. So I think one of the recurring themes is that whenever we've done a physical event, we've always tried to get the rest of the community involved, the online community, by streaming everything, online chat, whatever works. And yeah, we've also run official tournaments over the years. We call them the OS World Cup, and they're run. Because we have the 4 different game modes, we run them like, back to back. It takes about 3 months to run each one of them. And we cover the prizes and everything ourselves, so we don't take any sponsors. I've always been about keeping everything as independent as possible. So all the funding for tournaments and these events and stuff, that all comes from the supporter tags, which is the way we actually monetize the game to some extent. I'll talk a bit about that later on. But yeah, the World Cup's 32 different countries. It's country versus country. And picks like 5 to 10K viewership on Twitch, which is pretty cool. Got a lot of people interested in watching over. And we have some really good commentators these days that help bring in the hype to the stream. So this is just a random clip I took from one of the tournaments, but it's 4 versus 4, UK US.
in the United States in it. Like, have such good ag, and they're pulling it back actually a bit.
Oh, keep it right. This is fine.
Oh, 80 did not break. I thought he broke.
Okay, well, that's pretty good. That's good.
Yeah, we got debate in the chainsaw race. Client has issued us a fact debate.
Yeah, so that's a very high-end tournament scene. And we also have user-run tournaments. So, you know, the game has a forum, and this is just, you can see how many there are. This is just in the last week or so. People running their own tournaments. We try to help them out as much as possible, give them the tools to do the streaming setup. And we occasionally help out with prizes for some of the bigger ones. But yeah, there's a huge user tournament scene. And that's kind of like we run the World Cup, and people have asked us to run more tournaments because the World Cup is team-based. It's very hard for individuals to participate if they just want to do head-to-head, or, you know, they're in a country where there's not enough pro players to actually form a team. But the community's taken over and done such a good job of filling in that gap that we haven't felt the need to, which is what I hope for. We really don't, because I try and keep the team very small. We don't have the resources to run our own tournaments apart from the World Cups. Yeah, so that's been really good. And this is some of the more recent news coverage that OS has got, just as a result of the tournament scene and the pro player scene. So Business Insider, like, what the hell? Talking about, yeah, I think Ninja is LoL players. Someone must know. Fortnite. Yeah, he uses OS as a warm-up for his fingers, so he'll just bring it up on his stream every so often. These are the kinds of things that have kind of kept new players coming in, because people just feel the need to share OS. And what else do we have? Yeah, PC Gamer talking about a guy that came back to the game after a while and set some crazy records. And Red Bull Australia talking about the Australian World Cup team. I think some of these are, like, there's OS players within these organizations that just like, I really want to write an article about OS, and trying their best to get the word out there. But it's still cool to see. And this is an interesting clip. Recently, Keiichi Yano, which is the director of OS Tatakai Oendan and Elite Beat Agents, was asked in an interview what he thought about OS. So I'll just play that quickly.
Are you familiar with a game called Bosu?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You know, the whole notion, and this is like a very regular thing now, the whole notion of a community coming to create and build content, and then everybody like kind of sharing around it, it's a great thing, right? And I think that was one of the funnest things that I had, because like with Oendan, it was very tailored stages and whatnot, and that was all cool. But to have all these people like working on all this data stuff, it was very inspiring for me, and the whole notion of driving community to create lots of different types of things, I think is a great thing, and I certainly would love to do something that
Yeah, so that was pretty cool to hear. Like, I'm kind of humbled by that, but I'm not sure what they cut out. He might have said some other things about yeah, so that's kind of my coverage of the community until now. That brings us up to current day. I'll talk a bit about the infrastructure of the game and the online systems. So it originally started as just something I was running off my own PCs. I eventually got one of my friends who had a more powerful server to run it from the US, because, you know, running things from Australia is not something you really want to do. Especially back then, bandwidth was very expensive. But eventually I had to switch over to dedicated hosting. So I was using SoftLayer because I needed a Windows PC to run the game server. That was .NET at a time when .NET would only run on Windows. Obviously times have changed these days with .NET Core being pretty cross-platform. Yeah. And that's just, you can see the rough growth of us. That's just, I think, unique visitors on the website or something. But yeah, it kind of went up pretty steady and then started spiking a bit. And yeah, these days I've converted everything over to using cloud just because it's a lot easier. And it's easier to get better support, I find. Like DigitalOcean are an absolutely amazing company. Like I won't say anything bad about them because they put in the extra mile just to get you set up. And until I switched to cloud hosting, I was moving between different dedicated hosting, and I never found a company which is actually there for the customer, especially when something goes wrong. When you have a dedicated server in someone's data center, quite often they're just renting a cage in a larger data center. So to get them to actually do something to your server, to reboot it or change hardware when it goes wrong, it can take hours or days. And that's not like I was aiming for 100% uptime, and that really annoyed me. So yeah, after switching to cloud providers, that issue has gone away. And like I'd highly recommend DigitalOcean for doing dev stuff or actual production stuff. Back when I started using them, I was using them since they first came around. Back then they were kind of tailored towards people looking to just do dev work and test things out, but these days they have like a full-blown production-ready system. So yeah, that's worked quite well. It's been very easy to scale with them as well, as you can imagine. And yeah, I had to add, 2013, 2015, around then, we started to get DDoS attacks quite often. And there was just one guy that wouldn't give up. It went on for like 6 or 8 months, and I had to put Cloudflare in front of the infrastructure, but the game server was running on .NET, and it was just a TCP server. So Cloudflare doesn't support TCP, they only support HTTP. So that was a huge issue for us because I used to just attack the game server and take it down. So I eventually got the bright idea of piping TCP traffic over HTTP just in small packets. And that's how it's been until today, actually. It still works quite well. So the game server actually runs over Cloudflare. It does something like 500,000 requests per minute, HTTP requests. And like I had to get special permission from Cloudflare to do that because I think I'm one of their largest request pushing clients. They're really small packets, obviously, but still there's an overhead in the HTTP header and stuff. So that's an interesting aspect. In the new stuff we're doing, when we're working on the new infrastructure, we're actually moving away from that. Obviously, just moving to a more REST API rather than doing this, stateful TCP stuff. Just works better in this day and age. And this is a thing I made a few years ago, but it still sounds pretty accurate to today. It's just a general look at our server structure. I mean, you can consider that each one of these servers is actually just a single VM, so they're not actually separate servers. Although some of them are, like the bitmap mirrors, anything which is doing high levels of traffic, I run them on OVH because I don't really want to do like hundreds of terabytes on DigitalOcean infrastructure, even though I'm on a grandfathered plan which says I get unlimited bandwidth, but I don't want to push my lock. So OVH have really cheap bandwidth, so I use them for pushing the bandwidth around. And yeah, DO for everything else, all the databases and stuff. We run MySQL as the backend for databases, and it's just like one master, then 2 read-only slaves, which we do a lot of the more intensive work on, and a third slave which is running 12 hours delayed, which is basically our backup. If anything goes wrong, we have a 12-hour window to roll back to any point. And there's obviously backups beyond that, but that's been quite useful when, I type a wrong query, drop a table or something, you can just grab it back in a few seconds. What else is there to say? And we use AWS S3 for all the redundant storage. So even though our servers are mostly just pulling from S3 and keeping it local, just so S3 can get pretty expensive if you're constantly requesting data from them, but if you're caching it locally and just using S3 as like a data store in case something goes wrong, it works quite well. And to give you a rough idea, I think our server costs something like $5,000 a month at DO and $1,000 at AWS, and then $2,000 or so at OVH. That's about it. We're running a lot of droplets, something like 50. And yeah, let's talk about song licensing. So us has always been about user uploaded content, and that's where things get interesting, right? Because people are just uploading anything they want without getting correct licensing. So yeah, I already said that first part. I mean, I came from a background of the simulator community where they were already doing this, so I really didn't think much of it at the time, and it was only when I started to get bigger that I was like, well, this could actually be an issue. People are probably going to start, you know, filing DMCA or having issues with the user content. And to an extent, I feel responsible for that because I made the system which people are using to upload the content. So we're constantly working on finding ways to improve, like, users understand. I don't think a lot of users understand how copyright works when they upload content, especially with the younger generations where they're so used to like YouTube being this thing where you can upload anything, and you know the audio might get blocked in a country, or you might get have the revenue stream claimed, but it's still generally seen as an okay thing to do. And to an extent it is, right? Because people are getting paid on YouTube and whatnot. But yeah, we do have issues with DMCA claims coming in, and I basically follow the standard procedure for that. At the same time, whenever we get one of those claims coming in, I always follow up with the record label or the artist and see if they're willing to do something to correct the situation, whether we correctly license their content or just explain to them how OS works. A lot of people think that OS is a very commercial game where we've actually published their music ourselves, not the users, and when they hear that it's users, they're like, oh, actually, that doesn't sound too bad, just continue on. What else? Yeah, I mean, it's a very subjective matter, but at the end of the day, I don't think OS is necessarily hurting the revenue streams of artists. We've had, especially in the more recent times, we've had a lot of artists reaching out to us being like, hey, thanks for us, basically, introducing new people to their music. Obviously the audience of us is these days it's, you know, a lot of the younger crowd which are interested in anime and stuff, and they go into us just being like playing all this anime music, and then they find this like heavy metal rock, and they're suddenly interested in these artists, and we've seen a lot of discovery happen on the platform, which is kind of cool. Obviously that doesn't correct the issue completely, but it's just something to note. One of the larger issues with song licensing, which I've come across recently, is especially in Japan, where there's a huge cultural difference in how people treat content they've created. It's very much like Japanese artists, they don't care about whether their music's being used for profit or anything. All they care about is they're like, I created this, therefore you shouldn't use it without my permission, full stop. And there's no room to negotiate with them. So that's something I'm kind of working through at the moment and trying to see if there's something we can do to correct the situation there. And I've been in discussion with a lot of Japanese artists, you know, to make something happen. We do have, so I'll go on to the next slide, which is our featured artist program. So we've been, from about 3 or 4 years ago, we started to contact artists and get them on board as official artists, where we correctly license their music and then provide it in a pre-packaged format where users can take it and create their levels for it. In the process of this program, we've tried to focus on the artists which are being used already in the game, so we can try and fix some of the more prominent ones, but also reaching out to new artists which we have heard or a user has recommended that they would work well. And yeah, we've got a good collection now, and we're building it really fast, like 4 new artists a month, and we're at something like 1,200 licensed tracks across 50 artists. So, and we have a backlog of like 6 months of new artists which we're ready to push out. So it's going quite well, and I'm kind of glad I'm funneling as much of like basically all the spare money we have that comes from us into this program to try and give back as much as we can to the artists. It's not going to correct the whole situation, and obviously with the Japanese side of things and other, it's not just Japan, it's Korea as well, South Korea. It's not going to correct that, but maybe we can change their attitude on the game going forward. We do have quite a few Japanese artists which are in the featured artist program, so it's just a matter of mentality, individuals, how they treat their music. It's an ongoing issue, and I don't think that'll ever go away. But at the same time, yeah, I don't think, because we don't advertise in the game, we go out of our way not to monetize the user uploaded content. I think most people are okay with that. So financials, what am I going to say here? Yeah, it's always been a hobby to me. I kind of already touched on that just now, but it's never been about making money, and it still isn't. I see it, money is just a thing which we need to sustain the game, sustain the small team, but not really looking to increase profits. Like we monetize the game via a thing called a supporter tag, which is basically just a donation system where you can buy a supporter tag, it goes on your profile, and you get a few extra customization options. Nothing which can actually help you in the game, just things to make it a bit more convenient to play, or give you, like main menu, background customization, that kind of thing. The hope is that people buy the supporter tags to support the game, not to get benefits from it, because I really hate the free to play, structure that most games are using these days. And yeah, I mean, I earn more at my previous job than I still am at OS, so I think that says something about it not being about money. Yeah, so we don't have any advertising, no sponsors, which means that there are no restrictions on what I can do. It's kind of like I still have full control, and we'll keep it that way. We have had a lot of offers for sponsorship and stuff, but it's just like I'm not interested in that side of things. And we reinvest all the extra money into both the featured artist program, but also giving back to the community. So when we have people that are doing a really good job in the community, I've got them on like a contractual basis to keep doing what they're doing, but also getting paid for it. I run a very small team, so we have, I think, 10 people or just under right now. And that's like 2 people working on the game client, 3 people working on the web and the API side of things, and then some customer support and people working on the featured artist outreach. And 1 designer. We have one designer. That guy you saw in the video, he does a really good job of keeping things up to date design-wise. And I've had criticism from the community quite recently, being like, you're stunting the growth of OS because you keep the team so small and you're not expanding it as you should. But it's not something I'm really interested in doing. OS has always been a community project, and the community takes it where they want to take it. I'm not going to do more from my side. And I automate as much as possible. So that's how we keep the team so small, is anything we can automate gets automated. Whether it be like full automation or setting up alerts and metrics and stuff and having that come into Discord via a bot and us just having to click to do actions and stuff. Just making things as quick as possible to get through. And this is just some up-to-date statistics. So we have 1 million unique players, and that's people that have played in the last month, and 260,000 log in each day. 20,000 concurrent players. That's all running on a single server instance. And yeah, 11 billion play sessions. That's from 2007 until now. We've never reset the scoreboards, and I think that's one thing which people really like about us is, when you set a score, it's there for good. We don't do seasons and stuff, although we're looking at doing that going forward, because when you do have a system which goes on for like 12 years, it gets very stagnant, and there's a portion of the community which doesn't like that. And yeah, 1,000 multiplayer rooms running on the server. It's all running on a single, it's now .NET Core, but it's a single droplet which runs the whole game server, and it does a pretty good job. I've done a lot of optimization on that. It's still piping TCP over HTTP, but it does it in an optimal way. So user-created content, we have like thousands of skins uploaded and lots of beat maps. That's just the ranked beat maps. They're the ones which have already been approved to a certain quality, but if you count all uploads, it's something like 800,000. And yeah, we store all replays. So we have 45 million replays stored on AWS. And those replays, you can watch them, so you can go back in history and watch really old plays and stuff. It's community driven. Yeah, it's made, as I already touched on, we're always like listening to the community. I think it's important to keep like a really close dev relationship. And I do that by answering emails. I answer like 30 or 40 emails a day. And also very active on Twitter and Reddit. You know, anywhere people are making noise, we make sure they feel heard and try and react the best we can. Obviously, we're not perfect, and a lot of people think we're doing things wrong, but you can only do so well. Yeah, so just some final things I thought I'd touch on which didn't fit anywhere else. OS has spawned a lot of community projects. It's really cool to see. So people have made their own game clients for it. People have made video YouTube series about how to create beatmaps, and you know, they've got their own Patreons backing that, and Twitch streamers which are making a living off playing the game. There's so much cool stuff going on as a result of us, which I'm really happy to see. And yeah, I said primarily reactive development, which is basically like I don't take the direction in a game that I want to take it. It's more what the community wants at that time. So it's always about reacting to what people are asking for at the point in time, rather than, you know, planning months ahead for what we're doing. Time saturation is the thing which I don't know if that's the correct term for it, but basically I spend my complete waking hours on OS, and there's no way I can spend more time on it. So from that angle, it's very important to like take a step back every so often and optimize my workflow and make sure I'm doing things as optimal as I can, just so I can spend my time on as many things. And also it's important to figure out priorities. It's a very hard one when the community is asking for so many things at once, figuring out what to address first and where to assign resources. And yes, self-wealth has never been a goal, but it's important when you're running a project to keep track of financials and make sure it's sustainable. And if it isn't, you know, maybe take a step back or always have a backup plan. Like when I was working on OS until 2011, I still worked part-time at my other job. And even after that, I went on to like a contractual basis, but I still kept the option there in case I needed to, you know, stop working on this. Because I was never confident it was going to take off as big as it did or continue as long as it has. Yeah, so I feel like I've been pretty lucky with the project as far as people wanting to donate to it and me not having to ask for money ever or ever struggle. Yeah. And the other thing is staying independent. So we run our own launches, our own distribution. We don't use Steam or anything because I just like having full control over everything. I like control. Okay, so that's the end of this part of the presentation, which is just going over where we've come up until now. And we'll take a short break, and then I'll talk a bit about the future and what we're working on going forward.
All right, thanks, Dean. All right, do we have any questions at all? Oh, hey, there in the back. I'll run it to you.
Hi, thanks for the great talk. Around the tournament stuff and online tournaments, do you do any cheat detection and how?
Oh yeah, I can talk about cheats for days.
And how do you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a huge issue, and it's an ongoing issue. We did actually have very good cheat detection back in the day, but then I don't know how far I want to go into this because it goes deep. Basically, some guy hacked into one of our collaborators' GitHub accounts, got the source code, and then leaked that, exposed us for breaking users' privacy by taking screenshots of gameplay in the case we detect cheats, just so we could confirm that they were actually cheating. It wasn't like we were constantly streaming their desktop or anything, but so they made that guy hacked our account, uploaded that, and made us look like the bad guys. So I'm just like, okay, I can agree with this. It was kind of a privacy invasion, although a lot of other cheat detections do it. And we're also like uploading, process lists and enough data to let us see if cheats were running. And we had a pretty good success rate back then, like 100% detection. But after that happened, I kind of just removed all the automated cheats from the game, and now we rely on more heuristics and user reporting, and a lot of users have taken it on themselves to create their own anti-cheat or cheat detection. So they watch the replays and see if something doesn't line up to how a human's input should look, things like that. For tournaments, specifically, because the stakes are higher, we do require that players live stream, and so we can see their keyboard and stuff. Obviously, that's not perfect. I've seen people with USB devices they connect, which actually, send key presses in time with the game, so you can't actually see that it's happening. They're just pressing away at a keyboard, and so it's not perfect, and there's really no solution to that because we're running the software on an unsecured system. The only way you can fix that is by having physical tournaments, and we have been doing that more at the events we run, but it's just something you have to live with really for online tournaments. There's only so far you can go. And going forward, we're looking at new ways of doing cheat detection in the new stuff we're working on. But yeah, it's never going to be like privacy invading stuff because it's not feasible in today's age. Everyone cares too much.
Thanks, great answer.
Hi, a bit of a more of an economic question, but less on finance, more on business.
Yep.
So I was interested in how you were still working part-time, and then there was a time where OS became your full-time job. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So at that point, did you make the business yourself, and were you like the in charge of everything? Did you have all the stocks? Is that completely on you, or?
Yep. So yeah, I did everything myself. I've always like the whole journey. I've made sure I want to hand in everything that happens. Like I find it like interesting, but also good experience, I guess. So I just made a proprietary limited company and set it up myself. I obviously have an accountant which helps me with that. But yeah. At the start, I was just doing sole trader stuff, but eventually I set up a company and did it the right way. And it's been that way until now.
Does that mean you're completely in charge of the revenue streams, and that's responsibility falls on you?
I handle that as well. I have a lot of responsibilities these days.
You could call yourself the CEO, basically.
Yeah.
No worries, thank you.
Hey, so I'm interested. So, what is the OSU added mode for the virtual reality hardware? Because, like from the last year, there are several recent commercial games like on PlayStation, like the Saber Light or the Lightsaber. So they use the virtual reality hardware to play the racing game, and I think because on GitHub on the community, I see you have open sourced OSU, and so do you have setting a goal that like virtual reality?
Adding VR.
Yeah, VR mode. Yeah.
Excuse me.
In future.
It's not one of our focuses. Like, as you'll see when I go forward into the next slides, we're currently rewriting everything and getting the base game working again. And also there are 2 projects which have added like official OS beatmap support, so you can actually play. What was it? There's a Steam game called MacOS, which is just a remake of OS basically, and that one has VR support. And there's one other game which I forget the name of, but it's also on Steam. And in addition to that, someone has made a converter to get it into Beat Saber, so you can actually play the full OS library on there. Personally, I'm not hugely invested in getting VR working, but I'm sure it'll happen because now that we're open source and everything, someone's going to make it happen at some point.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for the talk. Just a question in going back to music licensing.
Yep.
You talked about like the Japanese or the Asian like composers. have you dealt with the Western ones by any chance?
Yeah. So the majority of the featured artists we have are all Western. In fact, it's probably like 60 or 70%. And some of the bigger ones we've got, I'll have to bring it back up and check. We have, what's his name? Porter Robinson under his other label. What's it called? Virtual Self. Yeah, that's one of the big ones we got. It's always interesting to deal with bigger artists because a lot of the featured artists we've got on there right now, we've been able to work directly with the artist. Once you start to involve record labels, it gets a bit more confusing and you have to sign like 3 different contracts or 2 or 3 contracts to do the deal. And we have found it to be a lot harder to deal with like major artists, but we're attempting it. We're working in that direction.
Yeah. So the question, why I asked that question is because like the cultural differences, like for the Japanese one, for example, as long as you credit it, they're fine with it. Most of them are fine with it. But because for the West, you have to deal with like record labels and all that.
Yeah.
They are more likely to to our audience this one is source because the way they treat copyright is different than Japanese ones. So how are you dealing with that?
So we find a lot of the Western artists, they're actually not too fussed about their stuff being used in the first place. Most of the DMCs we've got are from Asian artists. A lot of the Western artists, they're fine with it being used, and when we reach out to do licensing deals, they're like, oh yeah, sure, let's do it, kind of thing. So it's been a really positive experience from that side.
Thank you. All right, I think we've got time for one more. If you've got one more question, or... Oh, hey. Yeah, I know you.
So you had a point earlier in like a couple of slides back about time saturation, and then going back to an even earlier slide, you were talking about having the IRC server and the town hall meetings.
Yep.
How much has that process changed since you've had more people come on board, and what does it look like now?
Yeah, it's one of the things like, it's part nostalgia looking back at that stuff and being able to do it, but it really can't happen anymore because the community is so big. And we've had meetings, but it's hard to involve the whole community because there's just so many people talking, so many voices, so many opinions that we have to have private meetings where we have like read-only access for everyone else. But even then, it's hard to discuss things when you have all this stuff going on Reddit and everywhere, people calling you out on everything you do. As communities grow, it gets very hard to manage, and we're doing our best to keep everyone happy, but the process has definitely changed a lot. We don't do a lot of the stuff you can do as a small group of people anymore, and it's more about doing votes, polls and stuff to get people's opinions, or just reaching out, doing surveys, or just tweeting simple questions and seeing what the majority prefers to actually take things forward these days. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Dean. Let's hear it for Dean. Just a little housekeeping. Just as per usual, there's like refreshment outside in the little seating area. Let's maybe take 15 minutes or so, and then I think Dean wanted to go through some technical underpinnings, like with what he's been doing with the engine.
Yeah. So the next part, we've basically made everything open source in the last year or two, and rewritten the whole game, and we're finally at the point where it's almost in a usable state. We're kind of doing that development process along the side, so I'm just going to go through that in a bit of more technical detail. Okay, so I won't make this too long. I don't really have that much to cover, but what I was planning on talking about is the new stuff we're doing. So basically, I came to a point in OS development where adding new features to it was pretty much unfeasible because I was writing code so rapidly and haphazardly that, you know, code gets into a very spaghetti-like state if you keep doing that. Yeah, in like 2015, I started to refactor the code base and try and get it in a state where it's more flexible. And this is one of the early tests I did where we actually got it so the window could be resized to any size. You know, just a lot of the things which were really fixed in place had to be changed to allow us to add new features and expand the game going forward. But then, like, almost a year into doing those refactorings, it got more and more obvious that working with the old code and trying to fix it was not going to be possible. So I reached out to all the people involved in helping with development until that point and was like, we have to rewrite this. So we started rewriting it. And the idea behind it is fixing everything that was wrong with the previous code base. I think I have notes written down, but that's okay. And yeah, kind of making this the final version of OS, one that can live on and be expanded on and is more modular than the previous ones. No browser dependence, so moving all the stuff which people go to the website for into the game. We created a framework along the way called OS Framework. A very original name, right? And that's basically a game framework we wrote with OS in mind. I don't really have that much experience with other game frameworks, game engines out there, so it's been more about what we need, and focusing specifically on OS's requirements and also music rhythm games in general requirements. This is one of the really early tests I made on OS Framework. This is just a sample game I made where we were testing the ability to like nest drawable objects. In the previous version of OS, we were using X and A and just using like sprite batches to draw specific things on the screen, but nothing was really nested, so it was very hard to, rotate things or move things as a group. So from the start, we wrote this as basically a hierarchy where you can do things like this, and this is all like the rotation of the screen and the scales. It's all just one line of code to make that happen. This is just a quick test I made to make sure everything that we needed was possible. Yeah, I wrote that in about 2 hours, so that's it was good to know that we can make things happen in it. We've been developing this for since 2016, I guess, so it's been 3 years in development. Completely open source, MIT license. Anyone's free to do whatever they want with it, and that goes for the framework and OS as well, where there's no restrictions. People can re-release it as their own game if they want. I'm not really concerned about any of that kind of stuff. It's very high performance. With OS, we were running single thread input polling on that thread, so users were having to run the game at very high frame rates just so they get the input polling up to their 1000 hertz or whatever they need. We've decoupled all that in OS Framework. It's running 4 threads now: input, audio, draw, and update. You can see them here. This whole presentation is done inside OS Framework, by the way. So it's running 4 threads there, and if I uncap the frame rate, you can see it's running at 16,000 FPS there on the update thread. So that's the kind of performance we're aiming for. I think it's actually regressed a bit. We used to get 20K here, but yeah. And the top 2 are limited to 1000 hertz because there's no point running them faster. The idea being that we can run the draw thread at, monitor vsync or vsync times 4, and then running the update a lot faster for actual input handling and hit detection and stuff. We've been aiming from the start, as part of keeping the project in a very good state, really high quality code, commenting, unit testing. The other thing is backwards compatibility has been a huge deal because we've had OS running for 12 years and there's so many different revisions to the bitmap format, to the skinning format, to the way people interact with game, all the custom options they have. There's a lot It's probably the hardest part of doing the rewrite is making sure that all the previous stuff we've implemented still works. And that goes back to 2007. You can actually load 2007 beatmaps into this and it works fine. That's one of the main goals, is just to make sure everything can be still played. And extensibility. So that was one of the other main goals of this project, is to allow people to not only create beatmaps and skins and storyboards, but now they can create their own game modes. So we're adding this ability, we call them rule sets. You can easily load in your own rule set to Laser, and it will just come up as another game mode in the game. You get all the conversion of beatmaps across to your game mode basically automatically. It makes it very simple to implement this stuff. And the other thing is, on the extensibility front, is making it a lot easier to add gameplay mods where you can change the way OS gameplay behaves. In the old code base, we had like a lot of mods, but the code to implement the mods was scattered throughout various files, and we were using a lot of statics in the code. So it would be like, if this mod is enabled at this high level thing, then do this. In the new one, mods are just in their own class, and they use dependency injection to get access to other things and then apply themselves to that. So it's a lot more, and they can apply and unapply, so we can reapply mods if the user or the multiplayer game wants to change mods on an ongoing basis. Just trying to cover all our bases here to make sure there's nothing we're going to think of in the future which we can't do. And yeah, completely cross-platform. So we've already got it running on iOS, Android. I can probably show you one here. iOS, Android, Linux, macOS, Windows. And we already have automatic builds going out every time we do a release. We do releases every few days. We already have automated builds for all but Linux. Linux is pretty easy to compile. Yeah, so that's us running on iPad under OS Laser, and it runs at perfect 120 FPS. It can go higher, I think, but the idea is having the full desktop client available, so you've got all the chat features and everything, just as you would on desktop. We're not really making a mobile version as such. We're just trying to make the game adapt to mobiles. So like one thing we can do is like adjust the UI scaling to make it easier to play on big screens, on small screens, sorry. But yeah, it's going to be like completely cross-play and stuff. Currently it's on test flight. You can easily find the link if you want to give it a try. The Android is just an APK right now because Google Play Store is a bit weird with beta handling. Yeah, so open source, the idea being we can involve more of the community. It also means that can get contributions from people without actually bringing more people on the team. We've seen huge amounts of people interested in contributing to the project. Like if I just bring up, if I can spell, our GitHub. Right now we have like 87 open pull requests, and it's just at a point where we can't review them fast enough. Obviously, the ones that are in a very good state, we can get them in fast, but a lot of these, like, they need work, and we get to them eventually. But yeah, we made it open source to try and get more people helping out, contributing, and then too many people contribute, and we're like, maybe this wasn't such a good idea, but it is how it is. And yeah, the other thing with open source is improving transparency. With the privacy issues I mentioned previously, making sure people know what code is running on their system. I think that's important these days. You won't be able to compile OS and play online because obviously we need some kind of validity in the score submissions, but at very least you can check the source code. Redundancy is basically like, if I was ever to get hit by a truck, I would like OS to continue. So making it open source and make it completely no license restrictions means someone can take over if they choose to do so. I'm not sure I'd advise it, but. And yeah, we offer bounty for pull request submissions. So based on the quality of pull requests, we actually pay out money amounts. And we just use, I was using a thing called Bounty Source, which is a system made to do this, but they got bought by a crypto company, and now they're like, not doing good things, as is the way these days. So we just use Google Forms, except not everyone actually wants to be rewarded money for their contributions. The majority of people are just like, I'm doing this for the good of the community, I don't want anything back. But the people that do want money can request it, and then we just go in and we give a value based on how long it took and how good the submission was. I think we've paid out something like 15,000 in bounties so far. That's quite a recent thing, so I think that number will go up. I think I already touched on these. Yeah, so the aim is 0 allocations during gameplay. With a language like C#.NET, you need to be quite wary of allocations if you're using it for high performance scenarios. We're pretty close to that. We're doing quite good. Like here, you can see the garbage collections are the little dots flying by at the top of the update thread. If I drop the rate down a bit, you can see, yeah, so it's, that's way too many here. I don't know what the green ones are. I think they're Gen 0 collections, so something's probably wrong in my presentation code, but anyway, it's usually not that much. And yeah, we're aiming to implement modern optimizations like rendering front as a front to back pass and then culling surfaces. It's a common thing to do in 3D games, but in 2D it's a bit more complicated because you can only do it when things are completely opaque and a lot of things are transparent in the games. And you know, when we're rendering the whole thing as a draw hierarchy, it requires a pre-pass, and that needs to be drawn to the stencil buffer and stuff correctly. We got all that working, and yeah, we have a lot of stats coming out of what the engine's doing. I don't know if there's that much to see here. But we put a lot of work into just being able to visualize what's going on in the game. So we have like a thing similar to the Chromium Inspector where we can actually nail into, you can't really see what I'm doing, but drawables on the screen. You can see how they're split up and go into them further and see all the arguments. So without using a debug tool, you can actually see everything in the game. What's that? Yeah. And yeah, all code that's merged into the project is reviewed by at least one person. So I'm never, with OS, the old OS, I was always just committing to master, but now even everything I do goes through a review process, just as anyone else's code would. We unit test everything we can. We have a framework built which allows unit testing via NUnit, but also visualizing those unit tests, because in a game, you know, a lot of the stuff you're looking at is very visual and you want to be able to see what's going on, not just have this headless test thing running in the background. So I'll show that in a bit. In fact, I think it's might be embedded into this slide. Yeah. This is our testing framework. There's not really many tests here because this is for the presentation. But yeah, you can like make unit tests and they come up here. You can adjust the rate of them and you create test steps. I'll show you in a bit the actual, in the OS testing setup. Backwards compatibility, I kind of mentioned this is more for people that are already playing the game, but yeah, there's a lot of different styles of bitmaps, styles of skins, and all the online systems that we already have need to be reworked to make sure they still work in the new implementation, because we're moving a lot of the stuff from the web into the game. That means a lot of new APIs being created and making sure all the old stuff is still accessible, and you know, where we can, adding write support from the game so that you can post to the forums and stuff from inside the game. Extensibility, I already basically covered that. We're looking to make the game as extensible as possible, making your own game modes in it, and also allowing skins to not just define textures and sounds, but also define drawables, which is our way of forming hierarchies of stuff in the game. So you'll be able to create vector objects, customize animations, do basically anything you want via skins. Yeah. Oh yeah, and this is, let me get rid of that. This is our, just a sample tournament stream. We stream this to Twitch for the World Cups and stuff. To make this work with the old game, with the current live version of OS, it's actually, in this case, it's 7 OS clients all running as different executable processes communicating via IPC. So it's not really optimal. It's not what you want to do. And we do need quite a bit of power in the systems we use to stream this to make it happen. So the 7th client is actually running the background, all the scores and stuff. That is now laser. So what you see here, that's actually laser communicating with the old OS, because the old version has better compatibility with the tournament play. We're not really ready to introduce laser as the game client. So we have laser running in the background, communicating with stable. And yeah, these are our tournament tools. This is what I just discussed, the laser stuff. I can, oh, yeah, this is bugged. I don't have a mouse cursor. And we're finally, like, it's been 3 years in development and it's become a meme. People are like, laser when kind of thing, because it's taken so long. But I would argue that it hasn't actually taken that long, since the original one took me, 10 years plus to write. So there's a lot of things to cover. Yeah, we're at the point where a lot of the pro players are playing laser and being like, this actually feels better, it's better performing than stable. So now it's more like, hurry up and get this done, which is good to hear. It's good to get some positive feedback on it. Yeah, and we're already, as I said, we're already using it for tournament, but we're also using it for the difficulty calculation side of things, for calculating the star rating of bitmaps server side. Laser is meant to be something which can be used on the server and also the game client. So yeah. And yeah, are we going time-wise? No. I'll just quickly show you the testing framework we have, because I think it's kind of cool. So this is just going through the OS unit tests we have. I don't actually... It's okay. So I mean, as I go through this, I'll just speed it up a bit. But you can see it's testing like various components of the game. And here you can see them as visual tests, but really that actually just failed. All these steps are just lines of code which are which can be run under NUnit as headless tests as well. And when they're headless, they run instantly because we just speed up the clock in the background. The whole OS framework, we have this clock structure where you have complete control over clocks, and clocks can be defined at any point in the hierarchy. So, for instance, in gameplay, we take the game's clock and use that as an interpolation mechanic against the audio clock, but then we also add offset clocks when the audio starts from a different point. And if the user has a offset set because their input latency is high, then that's applied as a clock. So we have this like separate clock hierarchy. Yeah. So you can see like these are just individual components and we're testing them. That's a server alert. It's okay. Yeah. And we have like 500 plus tests. You can see they just play through gameplay, make sure that fail's working correctly. Every single thing we can think of, we're testing. And I think the overhead for making this kind of tests is quite large, but I do think it's worth it. It's definitely caught a lot of issues, especially as we have people contributing a lot via pull requests. It helps them out as well because they see if they've broken something without us pointing it out to them. Yeah, so that's our testing structure. What else? I can show you... I guess I should probably show you the game as well, but let me just show because it has changed a lot from the previous version. But this is our tournament thing. I spent about a month working on. This. It's basically a tournament streaming setup. It's the thing you saw running in the background of that tournament thing, where you can create a tournament. I'll just do this quickly, and then place the teams on. Do this kind of stuff, create the whole tournament here, and then once you're done with editing it, you can start streaming this. So you go in here and you select a match, reset the scores. You get a schedule of the matches which are happening. If you've set up beat maps, then you can see them in this display. It has all the different screens that not only we use, but also streamers, which are streaming their own community tournaments, can use. So made this as modular as possible. And the green you see is actually used as a green screen to go through to the stable client display for the gameplay. Yeah, so that's our tournament thing, and that was kind of like another test I did to make sure we were going in the right direction. There's a lot of, as you saw, there's a lot of screens there which are taking information from each other, and we call it like a bindable structure where they can all get updates, message updates in a very sane way. I'll just play that intro again because the intro is really cool. It's a recent addition. Yeah, so I haven't really shown the original game that much, so people that aren't familiar with it probably won't know what's changed. But yeah, we've done a lot of work on the UI UX experience, like just making things feel like they should. All the web views, like this is, you can see the change logs in game. This is what you'd usually go to the website to see. I mean, we're still missing stuff like comments aren't here, chat. Finally have like PMs in game hooked up with the website, so everything's like.
Apparently it doesn't work on a Celeron 3400. And you need to fix it now.
Is that a recent CPU? That sounds kind of old, doesn't it?
No, it's recent.
Isn't the E3400 like 2008?
Yes. It's a green mode.
Yeah, so we've got like user profiles in game, which is something we didn't have before. So you can see, you know, we're basically bringing the whole website into the game, and this is all done using the laser drawable structure, not actually using any web views or anything. I'm allergic to web views. What else can I show? The other thing we've got is every option in the game can be dynamically changed during gameplay. So, and like I can bring up the toolbar during gameplay, can do all the other stuff, but I can also change options. And I'll just show you a few of the options that I think are quite cool. So we have like scaling modes where we can actually scale the game screen to a specific place on the screen. And this is for people that have a huge monitor and want to play OS like that big. Or maybe they only want to have the game windows scaled to that region and have the UI still be the full screen, so you can actually scale gameplay down, and the rest of the UI, like all these overlays and stuff, still go to the full screen. And yeah, it was really cool because adding these UI scale features only took about 20 minutes. That's like, because we had everything in place already, it was just a matter of adding a setting and binding to one value, and that's done. So yeah. Yeah, it's a bit, I've got a fix for that coming. It's not supposed to play sounds when you're fast forwarding. But that's the other thing, we've got gameplay completely rewindable. I can show you, like, if I change this to gameplay now, it'll keep the gameplay scaled down, but scale the rest back up. So you can, yeah, see where the gameplay is going to be. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things that we've done. Like, I can interact with this in real time and see the different things going on. What else can I show?
Show us the profiler.
Profiler? What, this thing?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, let me unlimit the frame rate. So like 4,000 FPS at the main menu. But if I stop the audio, because the visualizer is playing, if I stop the audio and bring it to idle, this is showing 7,000. A few weeks ago I was getting 16,000, so something's definitely regressed there. We don't actually have performance regression testing yet. That's something which we really need. But yeah, it's still quite high. We're just aiming for, like, my goal is 15,000 update FPS, just because then you can be sure when it's running on mobile platforms, the battery usage isn't going to be too high. You're never going to have to run it at that frame rate, and like even on desktop, you shouldn't be running that fast because rendering too many frames isn't going to do anyone good. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you can see, I haven't really shown the other rule sets off, but you can change the rule set up here and that'll actually change the game mode that you're playing. And I mean, if I had more time, I'd show it, but you can basically just load your own game mode in here And we've already created like template projects for that. So I'll just quickly show you. How do I? Yeah, so we published like a .NET template project, which has 4 different rule set templates, and I can just run this one command. It's going to create, this is really cool stuff. This is actually .NET Core. It's not really my stuff. It'll create the full solution for you, and just go into the solution. And it's instantly compilable. It's already got, we publish all the game and everything via NuGet, so it pulls all that in. And I can just run this once it finishes inspecting. And it'll drop me in the testing environment for Give it one more try. Yeah, I think the working directory is wrong or something. Anyway, in theory, that'll drop you in the testing environment and let you work on your game mode. And then you can just drop the DLL into the OS folder. It'll read that, bring it up. It'll come up in the top menu, and you'll be able to play it as if it was part of the game. So I think that's one of the coolest things about the direction we're going, is just the ability for people to make their own games basically within OS. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. Like the framework is made for OS, but at the same time, I think it's a pretty cool game framework in general. And the framework side of things, we're doing really heavy testing on. Like OS, we kind of half-ass the unit testing, maybe 50-60% coverage, but framework, we've got like pretty much 100% coverage, and we're working on the documentation. So if anyone feels like they want to try a new framework, and maybe even if they've got experience with other game engines, I'd be interested in hearing like your feedback on it and seeing if we're doing anything better or worse. Yeah.
Can you use the framework not on Windows?
Yeah.
To develop on?
Yeah, it works everywhere. I develop on a Mac, and other people work on Linux, so. Yeah, we're kind of at the point where we're pretty happy with the framework, so we're looking at maybe getting more people to use it for their projects. I mean, there already are some people, like someone wrote a really cool Geometry Dash editor, an unofficial editor for Geometry Dash using OS framework, and it's really well made. And that guy like had a lot of positive things to say about using it. And another guy, one of my friends, is using it to create a visual novel framework as well. So yeah, I can see it being quite, I mean, let me just quickly show you some sample code for a drawable structure, because we don't have a visual editor for the framework. It's more like you structure the code as if, as how it would look on screen. What can I even show? Now playing overlay. What's it called? Are we in the right project? This is the wrong project. This is definitely the wrong project. This is the old OS code base for some reason. I don't even know what's going on. It's frozen. Yeah, there must be another window open. There we go. Yeah, so this is how the code is structured for something which is displayed on screen. It's a hierarchy where each thing has children. You know, I think it may be similar to something like WPF or maybe some other frameworks out there. But we've designed everything from the ground up to suit ourselves. So I think from that side, like, I'm not sure if it's better or worse than other things that already exist, but it works really well for us. So like if I wanted to add a new like child to this, I'm just like add children, and then I have a few macros for this. But you know, you add a new container, then I can put a box in that container, and this is how it's structured. So it's very easy to see how your stuff written in code comes on screen. The other thing is our testing framework does dynamic recompilation. So as you make changes in the code, it just comes up on screen. So yeah, it's very quick for us to iterate on stuff, especially when it's visual. It's also heavily dependency injection based. So everything in OS uses dependency injection. The top level components are all DI cached, and then we consume them at lower levels. And that's one of the main things we had to fix from the previous code base, is that we had so many static components that, when we wanted to do the tournament thing where we have 6 different game windows running, we couldn't do that because there were so many statics in place. So we fixed all that. Yeah, I'll stop there. Any questions? Do we have time for questions?
Any questions?
Okay, we spoke earlier briefly about using the framework to create like a 3D rhythm game instead.
Yep.
How difficult would that actually be to do? Is that relatively simple, or is that going to be quite hard until something's
it really depends
done?
on your experience as a developer, and because we're doing everything like code first, I think maybe if you're not so experienced, Unity or something may be a better suiting engine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. No worries. Thank you.
Like everything we do is very, it's geared at someone that wants to live in the code, not live in a graphical editor.
Yeah, no worries.
So this is, everything I've seen is basically a 2D rendering environment.
Yep.
Does this run 3D as well at all?
No. It doesn't run 3D, but basically the team behind this is me and one other guy right now, the core team, and he is very interested in getting 3D running. He's already done it to some extent on the side. I'm kind of against it because I want to keep the scope small, just because I think we're doing a really good job on 2D, but there will be 3D because we need, at very least we need perspective-based 3D for, Mania-style games.
Have you thought about adding any custom shader support options so that people can kind of make their own?
Yep, we already have full shader support, GLSL. And yeah, this is GL. We're looking at switching to Vulkan at some point in the near future, because GL I don't think has a future.
All right.
Thanks,
all right.
Apple.
One more question.
Hello. So taking out the open source, like if you're doing this type of project for yourself, is there like an advantage of creating all of this from ground up instead of sticking to existing engines like Unity?
I'm not sure. It's a hard one to say, but we have very specific requirements with us, and like I know exactly how I want stuff to be. And what I've heard from Unity is that it's probably not what I want. Unity has a lot of issues, and we may have spent an extra year getting things right here, but I think it was worth it. And we're at the point where everything's working exactly as we want it.
So it's worth spending, like, say, a year or two just to get like framework done instead of like using an existing engine to save time.
That really depends on your situation. I think in our case it was, because we already had a stable product which people were happy with. So we didn't really have a lot of pressure on us to get things done quickly. And because the whole premise of rewriting this was getting things right from the start, it made sense. Okay. I didn't really look at other engines out there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. I think that does it for tonight. What time is it? It's like 20 past 9. Yeah. Yeah, we should probably get out of here. All right. Well, thanks, Dean. Sorry for Dean.
Thank you.
And yeah, thanks everyone for coming to this Let's Talk Games. It's been really great seeing everyone. Yeah, let's. I don't think we have any more. Do you have any more announcements?
Go home.
Yeah, go home. Go home. We're going to be trying to do more of these, of course, going forward. At some point, I'll put some sort of poll or something as to what you guys want to see. Yeah. Something like that. But it's all contingent on like what you guys want to see. So just tell us what you guys want to see. And yeah, thanks. Hope to see you again.
there. You tell me.
I just need it to look like it's coming at the screen. You can do that just by
Yeah, you can just scale perspective.
So why am I getting so caught up in making
It just goes back. 100 hours.